And just introducing yourself, telling us your first name.
Sure. Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm Amanda McCoy Flanagan. I'm 43 years old, I believe. Yeah, I am 43. Um,
Give or take.
Give or take, depending on the day. Not always acting my age. I'm from Oceanside, New York, which is a town on the South Shore of Long Island.
Yeah.
Lived there for 35 years until I moved here to Colorado in 2015. I went to school in upstate New York, a college called SUNY Albany. I got my master's down on Long Island at Stony Brook University. I have a master's degree in social work. My college degree is English and journalism. I've always been interested in writing, in communication in general, and that's sort of, I guess, what led me into writing a book. I grew up, I have an older brother who has passed away, and an older brother from my father's first marriage. I was the youngest. I was always the youngest. I was the youngest of 9 cousins, and by quite a large margin. Me and my brother was 3 years older than me, and then there was like quite a bit of space between our other cousins because my mom was the youngest of her siblings by like 9 years. So I grew up in a relatively middle class type of situation. Dad worked nights. Mom also worked. We got a good education. We came from a nice town. Parents gave us everything that they thought we needed. And we come from an Italian family. We're Italian. Yeah. And, generationally, what I've come to learn and what I'm trying to do differently with my kids is, even though, my parents were present and they were there, and they gave us everything that we needed, food, clothes, shelter, more than we needed, right? We grew up very, I don't even like to use the word blessed because I believe everybody's blessed. I don't believe I'm like more blessed than others. But anyway, there were some things that I've noticed now in my own upbringing, just from the sheer reason of being born in 1980, that things are different generationally, right? So although we weren't given a lot of maybe time and attention or sort of like respect, I want to say, in terms of being heard, right? Mm-hmm. Like I ask my kids all the time, like, how do you feel about that? What do you think about that, right? And I just think that wasn't really a thing. It just wasn't the norm back then. Doesn't make my parents, any lesser of a parent than I am. It's just not how it was, So we've kind of learned, I think, over the years of seeing addiction, seeing mental illness, seeing suicide, seeing the effects of certain methods of parenting that just didn't really work very well. So I learned from that. I'm trying to do a little bit differently with my own kids.
So what would you say were your first big traumas? Was it the lack of being seen and heard? And I know you talk a lot about abandonment in your book.
Yes. So there's a phrase, it's called emotional abandonment. I learned that in one of the 12-step programs that I go to. Mm-hmm. And that program really opened up my eyes to a lot of stuff that had happened that I sort of just pushed down, repressed. And when I went through the work in that program, I was able to then bring up the traumas that happened. I wouldn't say I was traumatized by my parents. It was more just, I guess, their lack of knowing how to handle things. But it was 5 years old, my first sexual trauma with a babysitter. And I call it trauma. I don't call it abuse because I believe that there's a spectrum, just like grief. I said my brother passed away. I wouldn't consider my grief to be at the same level of intensity as somebody who's lost a child. We have grief in common. There's definitely a commonality, but then within that, I believe that there's different sort of levels of effect of how it affects a person. So I call it sexual trauma because it wasn't to the level of some other, stories that I've heard. But it still affected me. And the point of me saying that is that it doesn't matter so much what the actual event that happens to a person. It's how it affects a person, right? So I could have the same situation as you, and it could affect me for the rest of my life. And you could couldn't affect you at all, or you could go to 3 therapy sessions and be fine with it, So whatever your trauma is, whatever's affecting you, that's what you need to hold on to and look at and not brush it aside and say, well, it wasn't as bad as some so and so, so I shouldn't, be as affected. So it's not necessarily the event, it's how it affects us. So that was the first. 7 years old, again, had another one, which was a neighbor friend. And it could be looked at as experiment or whatever, but given the ages, it really wasn't. And it was felt almost like a power play, right? That's what most sexual abuse or trauma or anything like that is. That's what it's about, right? Power. And I'm sure he had some experience like that happen to him. And so when I told my parents about that, my father did take it very seriously. He definitely had my back. I don't think my mom really knew what to do with it. Again, you just didn't really talk about things like that as much. Like, it happened, it was addressed, and then it was never talked about again, right? But it affected me. And it wasn't like, hey, go to therapy and heal and look at the, do the work to heal, Amanda. It just wasn't like a thing. So I lived with that pain, I guess, inside for years. And then when I was 13, I started drinking. And I started, I found an escape. I found something that made me feel more comfortable in my own skin.
So would you say those initial traumas, sexual traumas that you had, how did it affect you on the spectrum for you when you were an adolescent or growing up as a teenager? How would you rate that?
I don't think that they weren't really forefront of my mind. I actually didn't remember the one when I was 5 until I was 21. And they say that's quite common when you go through something like that as a child. Part of your soul sort of, I don't know if you know anything about shamanism. But shamans are soul retrievers. And basically what they're doing is going and getting the part of your soul that sort of fled to protect yourself, almost like a defense mechanism. So to survive, basically. So I wasn't carrying it with me from age 5 until 21. I guess I was, but it wasn't conscious. And then when I was 21, one night I was drunk and I had this memory. And I asked my brother, did this happen to you? Do you have this memory? And he said no. And then we called a friend who because I remembered, I had a vivid recollection, a visual of being in the playroom where it happened, and a bunch of children, kids that I grew up with, very close family friends, sitting in a circle playing a game on the other side of the playroom. And one of them turned around and said, what's going on over there? Because we were playing horsey, where he was bouncing me up on his lap. And I remember, I just remember, I just had this come back to me, this, it's okay. We're playing a game. Don't worry. Keep playing your game. We're playing horsey, whatever it was. Amanda's fine. But it just came flooding back. I guess maybe alcohol, drugs kind of open up different avenues of consciousness that maybe I wasn't able to retrieve until that exact moment. So it wasn't something that I really carried as a deliberate, I wasn't drinking to deliberately escape that. There was just all this stuff inside. I had no idea why I was drinking. I started drinking 13 years old, like my brother and his friends were the cool seniors in high school, and they were, going to their keg parties, and me and my friends wanted to be cool like them. And again, like I said, I was always the youngest one. So I always was kind of hustling to like be cool. And that's what the cool kids did. So that's what I did. And I have an allergy to alcohol. So when I ingest alcohol, that's what addiction is, alcoholism. True alcoholics have a chemical imbalance. There's something that goes on in their bodies. When we ingest alcohol, we actually metabolize sugar differently. So it flips a switch. It turns something on to the point where then I'm craving it and I'm craving it and I need more. And it's never enough until I'm passed out or just cannot get my hands on anything else. So I kind of don't know when I crossed that line. I think I was born an alcoholic, but I don't know if I drank alcoholically the first time. I mean, I definitely wanted more. I definitely was, around 15, 16 was when I could tell you I probably have a problem with this. I was aware enough to know that I drank differently than my friends. You know, I was a designated drunk driver when I was 17. My friends trusted me that even though I drank, they'd be fine with me, you know. And I always just needed more than the rest of them. And I never wanted the party to end. Always wanted the party to keep going. 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm looking for more when everybody's passing out or going home or whatever. It's like day two, just starting kind of thing. So I didn't realize about the whole allergy thing, even though, you know, I would tell my mom, I feel like I have a chemical imbalance in my brain because I can tell you from one sip to the next where the change occurs.
Yeah.
And it was just wild thing. And when I got to recovery and I learned that it's, you know, this mental obsession, which makes me need to drink to make that obsession go away, even though I was sort of the type of person that I always knew something bad was going to happen. I was never, you know, they say a lot of alcoholics say, oh, I'm just going to have one. I'm just going to have two. It's going to be different this time. Yeah, I did that on occasion. But for the most part, I knew something really bad was going to happen.
Would you say your alcoholism was, this is just the fact, like you're just born an alcoholic, or what would you say it was more stemming from your traumas and coping with your traumas, or just both?
So I think it's both. So I think I was born genetically with an alcoholic gene since it runs through my family rampantly, and as well as mental illness. So I believe it was in me, and I believe it's in a lot of people, but I believe nurturing can affect whether you actually cross that line and continue. I think there are a lot of people who have the gene, but they get drunk and they don't like that feeling of being out of control, or they just care too much about themselves. They already have a sense of self-worth built in where I had none. So I think those people who have the gene and have a sense of self-worth and say, I'm just not going to do that to myself because I care too much about myself. I have too much self-love or whatever. So I think it's nurture and nature that play a part in alcoholism. So yeah, I was born one, and at some point I crossed that line, but I probably could have stopped before I crossed that line if I had enough self-love.
So the great myth was a big theme from, you know, in your book, and it's this myth that you created for yourself, right? Or
well, I believe it was passed down, and then I compounded it with my own thinking. So the great myth is the idea that everybody leaves me, everybody hurts me, love is painful. Basically, don't trust anybody because you're going to get hurt. So this was sort of passed down, I believe, generationally. I don't know if you remember the part of my book where I talk about back in the day, like mom's got like 8 kids, dad's off at war, right? There's cholera and there's diseases, and she doesn't have a lot of food, and she's just got to survive. She's just got to keep these kids alive. So there was really no time to process and feel her pain. So certain behaviors served humanity well at that time. So that mom had to shut down.
Right.
She had to just
survive.
To survive. And I think that we're at a time now, we're in a very interesting time in society. It's a tough time to be alive, but it's also a very interesting time to be alive. And I believe that we're all here to do this kind of shifting and help in this shifting and healing the planet that's going on. And I believe that a lot of it is kind of why I wrote my book, because I believe that healing our personal pain it will help heal the planet, because I believe the chaos out there is because there's a lot of chaos in here. So we've had these mindsets, we've had these certain ways of functioning which are now dysfunctional, that need to be shifted. And we've just been, as a humanity, cellularly, we've been living out these ideas of, I need to protect myself. I can't snuggle with the kids. There's no time. I got to keep these kids alive. You know, like there's no time for the warmth and the affection. And we need that as humans. We need that. And I think that we're learning now that is what, you know, I believe that compassion, that shared love, that connection with other people, healing our energy in that way is what's going to help heal the planet. So to your question, the great myth, that's part that passed down in an effort to protect me, basically, so that I don't fall apart, so that I can take care of my children, so that I will not be devastated when that person leaves. So I have these traumas that go on. I have other experiences throughout life that are affecting me. Then my father, the big one, when I'm 16, that sort of kind of clinches the deal for me on this idea, which I don't know. I'm not aware of. I don't know that I'm walking around like this,
So
mind you.
you already had this idea even before the divorce of your parents. That just kind of cemented it for you?
Jeremy's death, my brother's death, is the thing that really cemented it, but these all compounded it. All these things compounded it, and it was there, but it was subliminally passed down indirectly through messages from family members, from different people. It was just in the actions. It was just in the way that we lived. And I'm a very sensitive soul, and I must have picked up on this stuff, and I just always felt like something wasn't right. I grew up with this feeling of something is off here. And I feel like what that thing was off was this love, basically, this unconditional acceptance and love and comfort and somebody being there, you know? So when my dad, you know, cheats or whatever, that's like one nail in the coffin, right? I have all these little nails in the coffin. And my brother's death in 2018 was like the nail in the coffin. It was a final nail. And it was like, you know what? They're right. You know, again, this is unconscious. So I pushed my husband away because of the fear that he was next to die. And when my brother died, all I could do for months was lay in bed, go to meetings, take a bath, and cry.
Are you very proud of yourself for not drinking throughout that whole time, though?
I am, and I you know, I don't know what carried me through. I was working with other women in recovery. I was helping other women get sober, and I believe that is the solution. That is, for me, that's the solution, is helping others. So that service piece, I believe, is what got me through. And I also have a lot of pride and a big ego at times that works for me. I don't want to go back and say I got one day back. I don't want to do this all over again.
Yeah, it's so tough.
My
Why
God.
try and find out? Who's to say you can do it all over again?
I might die. Who's to say I even have a relapse in me? I've seen enough people die. I mean, you read in the book, I had a boyfriend who died when I was 8 months sober. And so that was another one. So another nail in the coffin. And I didn't drink over that because, you know, I was told, you know, a couple of things that just kept me going. And one was, do you want to be in the no matter what club? And I said, what's that? My friend said, we don't drink no matter what. And I said, yes, I want to be in that club because I always want to be in your club. Whatever club you have to offer me, I want to be in because I want to belong. Yeah, and I have this constant search for belonging somewhere.
Wouldn't you say that could subconsciously actually be a very deep form of self-love, that even when you went through all those things and you're grappling with the great myth and those things, that at your core you do have some sort of deep self-love to not sabotage to the point where to go back drinking? Like, you're still giving yourself at least the chance to move forward in life.
Yes, and I believe even the moment of putting down the drink is showing self-love and self-worth, even though when I got to recovery, I thought I had none. But it dawned on me a few years ago, like I must have had a shred of something there that I wanted to stop killing myself, because that's what I was doing. I was slowly, socially acceptably killing myself. So yes, 100%. So I've had 3 serious emotional bottoms in recovery, like serious, on the floor, crying, you know, having to call people, like back in therapy, you know, stuff like that. 3. The first one was when Mike died, when I was 8 months sober. The second one was when I moved to Colorado. It was very difficult for me to adjust. I didn't have a lot of support. My family, my mom was really upset that we moved. That was very difficult. Other people in my family felt abandoned. Like, why would we choose to leave them? We didn't come here for a job. We didn't come here because we had to. We came here because we chose to. And to to the people that are in our lives, they felt like, well, why aren't we more important? Why would you not want to be here? You know, and it wasn't about that. It was about our family and giving our children a nice, what I believe is a really nice quality of life. But so the third time then was when Jeremy died, which was the most severe, which is interesting because I was 12 years sober at that time. You would think You would think, because I have been doing all this self-reflection, I had been working my program. I wasn't just like not drinking. I was actually like sober, right? There's a sheer difference between abstinence and sobriety. And I was working with others. I was going to meetings. I was doing all this stuff. And I still had this big void. I still had this huge hole in my soul. And it was when I moved to Colorado and the second breakdown I had, I had, luckily before the breakdown, a few months before, I had this experience. I started meditating a lot. And I had this experience where this light, this spirit kind of came out of the darkness and shined its light onto me. And I was able to receive it. And that was where the self-love and self-worth that I had, but didn't know I had, I guess, really flourished. It was evident to me now that I can love myself. I'm allowed to love myself.
You have to love yourself.
You have to love yourself. There's no honor in martyrdom. There's no honor in being, suffering. I do believe suffering is necessary for, right? Pain is a touchstone of growth, they say. I do believe that I have to be in a certain, after all those 3 breakdowns and other pains in between in my sobriety journey, I've always kind of bounced back stronger, better, wiser. And I wouldn't go to the depths of healing if I wasn't in some kind of pain. I don't think most of us that are happy, joyous, free, walking around all the time are looking to excavate the parts of themselves that need healing.
Yeah, why?
Why would you?
Why if you're
good?
If you're good. But those things come
Yes.
in the most probably not the best times, where all those issues rise back up, and if they're not addressed, or if you're not aware of them, they can really dismantle your life.
Oh yeah.
And it can be a force of its own. If you're not conscious of it, of what those inner motors are driven by, fear, hate, resentment, lack of self-love, the initial traumas, and I do think they play out again and again. And I don't think they stop playing themselves out. I think you just know what's happening.
Yes. You become aware and you can manage it better.
Yeah. And you can stop hurting yourself, stop hurting your life, stop hurting your future, and you can move through life better. But it's tough because you also see, and we all see successful people, and they don't, it's like you could still be successful and not address any of your issues.
Sure.
So in our society, since we put on a pedestal the result of the success, but not the inner world of the person. Like when I always look at successful people, I always wonder, I'm like, I wonder what their inner world is like, because if you can have all these things, but your inner world is turmoil, I don't know if I would change my life. I actually wouldn't change my life for that. Yeah. But you can also have both, and it does take a level of awareness. I do think you have to navigate through the pain.
Definitely.
But you don't have to stay there.
Exactly. I don't think suffering is optional, but how long I stay in it, that's what's optional. I stay in it for as long as I need to learn a lesson. And then I almost have a duty and an obligation to then go out and shine that light into the world and onto others to help them. What's the point of the suffering? The point of the suffering, to me, is to help others.
Yeah.
It's not just about me. Yeah, it's great for me to be out of it and for me to be, skipping through the daisies, and life is great. But what am I doing with that? I can't keep that to myself. And we're not meant to keep it to ourselves. And yeah, to your point of not knowing or these things come up, these things crop up. For me, the last breakdown I had where I pushed my husband away, I didn't know that any of this stuff was going on underneath. I remember back in 2009, I was in therapy, and my therapist said, you have an issue with emotional intimacy. And I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know what that phrase meant. And we were talking about how I was trying to make friends in recovery, and I kept chasing people that were pretty much emotionally unavailable. She said, why do you keep going after these women to be friends with you who are not responding to you? And it was a way to keep myself safe, because they wouldn't go get vulnerable. right? If I was focusing on the people who weren't going to make me go there, then I'd stay safe. And I realized that I'd been doing that with my husband because he has PTSD, which miraculously, I mean, if you have PTSD, look into RRT, which is a type of hypnotherapy. It was like life-saving, life-changing for this man. Different person. It's a type of hypnotherapy, but it's not like you're getting sleepy therapy. It's a
What do you say to people who have
meditation.
the reservations about alternative therapies?
What do you got to lose?
Yeah,
What do you got
that's
to
a good
lose?
point.
Just have an open mind. Like, I mean, why not? I think it's worth a shot. If you're suffering that much, may as well
Yeah.
just give it a shot.
I agree.
So, coupling up with my husband back in 2007, my boyfriend that when I was sober 8 months and died, he had just died like a few months before I met my husband, Jim. And again, what was going on subconsciously for me was this great myth, this pain. I'm never going to allow myself to love again to that capacity because Mike's death took me down, right? Just like my brother's death took me down. So I got into this relationship with my husband. Unknowingly, I was really holding myself back because I was afraid of emotional intimacy. Because if I get too close with you and you leave or you die, I'm going to be crippled.
And it's
But not anymore.
I find that fascinating that not surprising but fascinating that you can be in a marriage with children and hold back still.
Yes.
It's fascinating because how could you do that? It's not surprising because I know myself and I know my capacity to hold back and to protect myself and me and my family, we grew up in trauma. We grew up in violence. We're from the inner city of Los Angeles. My parents divorced when we were 5. My dad was abusive. My mom then became super abusive. It was ingrained in us also by our mom to never trust anyone. Because when she's raising 6 kids and we're in the hood, you need to not trust people.
Yeah, you got to be on guard. You got to be on guard 24/7 because you have to protect yourself and others.
But then you move through life and you're able to protect yourself, and then what protected us then is only hurting me now.
Exactly.
And still letting that go is still tough at times.
Yeah.
Because I've gone back and I now see the world that I have to trust people, to move forward in life. But I still can have a knee-jerk reaction. I still have what's ingrained in me, and sometimes it can help me. But primarily, I think those things of survival in this day and age are kind of hurting us.
We don't need it anymore.
But what if we have to survive all of a sudden? Do those instincts just kick right back in?
Yes, I think so. I think they're always going to be there.
So we don't have to worry about even honing those, that we'll have those naturally.
I believe so, because they're so there. It's like centuries and centuries. Like this stuff is living in your DNA, right? And then when you learn, it's not like you're just getting rid of all that and replacing it with this trust, self-love, self-worth, whatever's getting you to that place of trust. Because that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to you can learn to trust because you know that you have yourself, that no matter what, you're not going to self-abandon. Yeah, I may end up on the floor if my husband dies. He's 12 years older than me. He's sick from 9/11. He's a first responder. He has chronic respiratory illness. There's a good chance, I'll be alone later in life. And I probably will hit the floor. My track record kind of tells me I don't do well with loss. But I'm going to get back up. I've always gotten back up. Why would anything else in my future be different, right? My therapist has said to me once, I'm not worried about you because you have a 100% success rate of being okay after I fall apart. And the fall apart part for me is necessary in order to then grow. It's like if I'm here and I fall apart, I bounce back here. And then I fall apart and then I bounce back here. So I'm constantly going higher through all of that pain. But yeah, it's we're just being called to do this kind of work and to break these chains. I talk a lot about breaking chains of generational dysfunction. And if we don't do it inside, we cannot expect the world to get any better because all we're doing is projecting out. our own pain, right? If
For
you believe in the
sure.
law of attraction, it works both ways.
I definitely believe in projecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was projecting the other day, and just as long as I caught myself, I think, and I was reading your book too, and then I was like, man, I need to, for 4 years straight, I got up and I journaled every morning, and
Nice.
and like I needed that every day to like reset my heart and my spirit, and to set the tone for the day. But now it's kind of like I feel like I don't need it as much, but I still miss it a little bit, and I feel like I need to start doing it more. So what I did, I told my girl, I said, I think we need to build up our spiritual practice again. And she was, she could rate her. She's like, this is what you want to do.
This is what you need.
And,
Yeah.
when you're in a relationship, do you think it's like for me, like that instance right there, how do you stand, like you said, two people come together as a whole, then you make the whole within the relationship.
Yes.
So how do you upkeep your wholeness, like your routine, your spiritual routine, and your husband does the same for himself, and then how do y'all meet together?
So we have a very interesting and unique situation. My husband retired from the fire department in New York when he was 45 years old. My daughter was 10 months old. I was 34. 33. I don't even know. We were young. I was like 33. So we essentially are retired, which is strange because we're young and we're raising now two little girls. My husband and I have been home raising our kids together for the past, my oldest will be 12 in a few weeks. So we've had that. It's been a challenge for us. And when we went to marriage counseling after everything fell apart after my brother died, one of the big issues on the table was not like having our own space, right? Like I don't have like dominion over my kitchen like most women might, right? Like that's their space. That's their space or whatever. Or, a man cave, like men have their, Jim has his music room. We made and I have my meditation cave. I have this little room that I have all my crystals and my cards and my this and my that. I have this really awesome space I go into. But for the living aspect, daily, every day, 24/7, we're always just kind of crossing paths and in each other's, I don't want to say business, but sometimes, we had to really practice and just live it of, okay, like you do your thing and I do mine, and give each other that respect and that space to go do what you need to do to take care of yourself, right? My husband spends his whole day taking care of himself. That's why he's retired, because he's sick. So he goes to the gym. He, does his whole nasal cleansing and all this. He's got sinus stuff. He's got GERD. He's got, he's got a whole bunch of bronchial stuff. He's got a whole bunch of stuff. So he has to do a whole bunch of different things every day to take care of himself. He has to prepare food and eat healthy. He's vegetarian. I'm vegan. So we spend a lot of time doing that. He meditates. So he went through that hypnotherapy, and the only reason why he's had such great success with it, it's been a couple of years, is because he meditates often, a couple times a day. He
continues to practice.
Yeah. What worked.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think that happens a lot with people too, is like you're journaling. And I've been guilty of it too. We ebb and flow. We ebb and flow, and then when we get into some kind of pain, then we pick it back up. It would be great if we could just be like consistent, but it's just all the way it's supposed to be, it's cool. But yes, so he does what he needs to do to take care of himself, because he feels that his duty and his job now is to stay alive and healthy while he's alive for as long as possible for me and my children. But we give each other the respect. We go to different meetings. He usually goes in the morning. We just, because we have all that time together, that we're like, it's cool. You go do your thing and I do my thing. And our family unit means so much to us. And that is really, I think, what pulled us through in the beginning of our marriage counseling, when I really thought I wanted a divorce. That's our driver. We have something greater. We have something important. It's not just, I need to go get my own spiritual fulfillment. It's, right. I need my spiritual fulfillment so then I can show up and be a good mom. And I can be a good wife, and I could be a good friend and a good sister, and, whatever, all these different roles that I play in my life. I do I wrote a book, and I do stuff on Instagram and stuff like that. So like I need that time. And a lot of my inspiration comes while I'm meditating, or when I'm running. I run, right? So like I have to do those things in order to then be a good steward out in the world of love.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
Comes to mind. You want to talk about your spiritual experience and how close you were to getting a divorce?
Yeah, it was pretty mind-blowing. So my brother died in March of 2018. And I grieved and I cried and I did all that for like 3 months. Mm-hmm. And at some point, my defense mechanism kicked in and said, "You're good. You're good." Thank God for my husband being home and around and able to take care of my kids. He takes care of the kids all the time too. I mean, we're kind of like a 100-100 type of relationship. But I really couldn't do anything. So he really stepped up. So by like June, so March, April, May, June, by like June, I was like, I'm done. I'm good. My brain, not consciously, again, I thought I was fine. I was in therapy. And I remember I was planning, I had tickets to go to a concert in Seattle to see Pearl Jam, which is my favorite band. Mm-hmm. And me and my brother were very close around Pearl Jam. His name was Jeremy. I actually heard the song Jeremy on the way here. And he died right outside of Seattle. He lived in Ocean City, Seattle, Ocean Shores, Seattle. Anyway, so I had these tickets. It was August, and I'm like, I'm still going to go. I went with one of my close friends, also in recovery. So we go, and we get there like a day and a half early because we want to get online. We want to get the front row. And I had an experience there where during the song Better Man, mm-hmm. she lies and says she's in love with him, can't find a better man. And something happened where I had this, again, I was in this, all the worldly space, right? I'm still in this I'm very spiritual and very connected to the other side.
It's a surreal moment.
Yeah, and the entire time, though, up until that moment, I was in this like netherworld almost. I wasn't really here. I wasn't obviously dead. I wasn't on the other side. I wasn't in heaven. But I felt like I was really searching, and I was really opening up, and I was feeling my brother a lot, and I felt like I was almost experiencing the other side to some degree. I was just in this really strange, deep place. And so I hear these lyrics, and I'm really open to like whatever like spirit wants to deliver. And I knew that going in. I said, I'm just going to be really open on this trip, whatever I need to learn, however I need to grow or heal, because Pearl Jam's always been a very big part of my life since I'm 12 years old. Their music has come in at different points of my sobriety. They've played a part, different parts, played my wedding. And anyway, so I hear these lyrics and I say, oh my gosh, I turn this song off every time I hear it on the radio. Every time it comes on the radio, I shut it off. And I could, say, yeah, I'm tired of hearing that song. I've heard it a million times, But in that moment, I got really honest with myself. And I said, oh my gosh, I don't think I love my husband. I can't find a better man. She lies and says she's in love with him. Do I really love him? And at this point, we were struggling. Our relationship had been struggling. This didn't just come out of the blue. We had struggled for a few years. I guess his PTSD started getting bad in 2014. Mm-hmm. So this is 4 years later that we basically, with each child, like it wasn't really bad when we met. Like the writing was on the wall, but with each child that was born, we talk about it often. He will say, I had more to lose. I had more to protect. I was like...
More pressure.
Yeah, he became more overbearing and he became more nervous, and it was affecting our kids. And I kept saying, we need to go to marriage counseling, I'm not really happy. And he kept saying, no, it's you, it's your grief, it's your this, it's your that. He kind of was just kind of pushing it off. So I come home from this trip and I tell him, I don't love you. I don't think I ever loved you. And he was like, what? He's like, your brother just died.
Yeah, was he like?
Yeah, he was like,
oh, take a deep breath.
Yeah, he was like, where is this coming from? Meanwhile, yes, we had been unhappy and whatever, but yeah. I was like dead set.
That was so way out there for him to hear. He was like, hold on, what's really going on?
Yes, and now we've been sober. I was sober 12 years. He's sober 22 years at this time. He has 10 years of, he had 10 years of sobriety when I met him. And we knew that most likely there's something else going on underneath the surface, right? Whatever presents typically is not the real issue. Mm. So I said, all right, let's go, finally, let's go to counseling. So I was already in the grief counseling, and my counselor does couples counseling as well. So She was fantastic. I was there with her for 5 years. I stopped going a few months ago, and she just really helped me so much. She is behind a lot of what I've wrote in my book. You know, I learned so much of that from her. So we go, and again, she says, like you said before, she said, you need to get whole, and you need to get whole, and then you need to come together as a third whole, because we were just very enmeshed. I was codependent, right? My happiness, my acceptance, my approval was very much, and my self-worth was based a lot on what he thought of me. You know, again, he's older than me. I came into this relationship like this newbie in recovery. He was established. He was successful. I felt like really lucky. Like, what does he want with me kind of thing, you know? And so I always had him up on this pedestal. And we had to go and do our own work so that I could feel that for myself, that it didn't come from him. It doesn't come from today, that self-worth and self-love. That's what this whole journey was about. It was a journey back to my true self, which is just love. And I don't need to, I'm not desperate. I'm not desperately searching for that approval from this one or that one anymore like I used to. And I did that, like I said, well into recovery. So it was pretty eye-opening, but I had no idea that that's how I was functioning. I thought I was good. Thought I was pretty good. Especially because that 2 years before this all happened, I had that experience where that light showed up and it filled my void and all that. But I was healing stuff around my relationship with my mom at that time. I remember saying to my therapist, how am I sober this long and still? And I didn't know this. And this is still a thing. She said, well, it's like peeling an onion. You had to peel the first layer in order to expose the layer underneath. So I had to go through whatever I had to go through to heal in order to then expose this huge elephant in the room that I didn't know was in the room because I was just going like this. That this really all came down to my own fear of emotional abandonment. And then if I give myself the love and myself that complete and total belief that I will be there for myself. Now Jim compliments me. I give it to myself. I don't need him to give it to me anymore.
Yeah, so if you did get the divorce, hypothetically, go with somebody else, eventually the same issue would arise.
Exactly.
One way or another.
Because it wasn't an issue with Jim. It wasn't the song I heard. It wasn't any of that. It was within me, something within me that needed healing. And, you know, so my book, I talk a lot, I say in there, not a lot, but I say, this is not about saving marriages at all. Some marriages should not be saved, right? It always takes two people, two parties to work to get this, something to get better, right? This is about doing the work inside of you so that you don't bring it into the next relationship, because that's exactly what my therapist said. She said, you're just going to be in the next storm wondering how you got here. Why is this happening again, right? Like people who are attracting and find themselves in these same types of relationships over and over and over. It's not the person that you're in the relationship with, it's you. And my mom used to say, who's the common denominator?
That's a hard pill to swallow.
It is, because that requires work. And people don't want to do the work because it's painful and it's scary. But it's so rewarding, as you've experienced.
Well, yeah, I'm alive still.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
we get to breathe.
And, you know, I did think, you know, when, you know, like really alive, you're not just alive. Like,
Yes.
I feel like I got a whole new life. And it's like, it is a huge adjustment. Can be overwhelming, you know. I've never been in a relationship sober. I've never been in an honest relationship in general. I've never tried, and like so many things are happening at once, and even though, you know, for me personally, when I have tough days and drinking's not an option anymore.
I agree.
Because I want to live. Regardless of what life throws at me, the ups and downs, like I still think it's beautiful because I can feel the highs and the lows, you know, and I'm not just monotone, you know, or like you said in your book, you see black and gray, and now you see in Technicolor. And I think I've heard a lot of people talk about depression in their lives, and, you know, me as well. One of the ways it's described is you see life in gray, and then when you rise out of it, it's like, whoa, there's so much going on
Yeah.
that I wasn't even able to see before. And not drinking gives me the ability to like still
Gives you a chance.
it gives me a
Gives you a
chance.
fighting chance.
Gives me a chance, and it's worth it. So I did want to ask, when you're in that possible divorce phase, did what you went through as a kid, seeing your dad leave, make you fight a little bit more for your marriage?
Definitely. I did not want to repeat the cycle. I didn't want to, because guess what? If I do, then that makes it that much harder for my children to then break the cycle, because they have the same issues, right? Like I said, this is a generational family dysfunctional
And it would have just
situation.
cycled.
Just kept
over
going. Maybe
again.
they would have broke it, but at least I'm doing something now. I'm showing them something different. And we're not just together for the kids. We're so much more connected. Like, it's just amazing. And my comfort level, being affectionate. Like, every time Jim and I hug, one of my girls, family hug, and like we all hug. It's like, what is going? Is this like a Hallmark movie? Like, it's crazy. And then the dog last night, like, put her snout and her head like right in between all of us, you know? And it's like, this is really sweet, and this is nice, and this is real. I never believed that happiness was real and like joy was real. I don't know if you got to that part in my book, but I say something like, I would look at other people, other families, and I'd be like, they're faking it. That ain't real.
That's a traumatized view of looking at life.
Yeah.
And I think that's natural. I think when I see, me personally being, traumatized myself, and like when I look at people smiling, that's not anymore.
Yeah.
But like, especially growing up, I'd be like, no, there's something about that. There's something on the other side.
Yes.
And
Yeah, they're hiding something.
yeah. And now I just take people at face value,
Exactly. And I don't need to be the arbiter of other people's happiness and
Exactly.
behavior. I just need to say, you know what? Like, I can have that too if I want it, right? Like, we can have like sobriety again, being like what you were talking about. It sounded like I was thinking about being asleep and then being awake. Mm-hmm. We are now awake, also because we're on a bit of a spiritual path, right? So, and I can have that in my life if I choose to, right? I need to make the decision. And if I'm unable to, then I need to seek the help. And there's plenty of help out there to help me get over that. It was like I was on this bridge for a really long time, and I could see the shore. I could see the beach, and it's beautiful, and it's sunny, and it's great. But I wouldn't allow myself to step onto it. I wouldn't allow myself to go into that joy and that love and that happiness and that peace, because I was afraid the shoe was going to drop. If I let myself go there, I'm almost like a fool, right? I'm almost like a fool, like, because then something happens. And then it's like, oh, what was the point of that? I may as well just stayed miserable, or, protected myself, emotionally protected myself. But it's available. It's available to every single human being walking the face of the planet. There's enough for all of us.
How was it going through the intensive therapy, at least for your husband, with the PTSD and like, how I wonder, how was that together, doing that together, like
Sucked.
in real time, like the feeling of it, while y'all were doing that, like that must be tough. You have to be so vulnerable. You have to revisit things you want to forget about, or
Yes.
things that maybe you thought you settled.
Yeah.
Why do I
100%.
got to go back there?
Yep.
And I guess the reason for you had some drivers to go back there. Obviously, you had a guide and your therapist telling you, like, hey, if you don't, it's going to happen again.
It's like do or die, basically.
So how was that? Like, within together?
The dynamic of
Yeah.
it. He did his own therapy. I wouldn't ask too much. So he started with EMDR. He started talk, and then he had been doing talk therapy for a really long time, and that really wasn't cutting it. And at one point we were in marriage counseling together for a few months, and I said, I think you really need to do some more here. And then she suggested EMDR. So he went off and did that. I stayed. We were in 3 different sessions, separate and together, for like a year. I went, he went, and then we went together. So there was a lot of therapy going on in our house. so I was doing my own thing, he was doing his, and then it kind of all culminated during COVID. So we started therapy September of 2018. COVID hit a year and a half later. We stopped going because it went to Zoom, and he didn't want to do Zoom. So we did something called Imago relationship therapy, which is, do you know Harville Hendrix? Do you know about that?
Well, I read about it in your book. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that experience really, I feel like, took us to, like, we were healing, but I still felt like I needed more. I always felt like there was this, like,
And what was the
thin-
notion of, if you can just
of Imago?
of Imago?
So the idea behind Imago is image. Imago stands for image. So this guy Harville Hendrix, it's almost like you marry your father, or you marry your mother, or something like that. So when we meet somebody on the onset, we think that they're the answer. Yeah, they're going to complete me. Which is a big red flag. If you feel like somebody completes you, that's a big red flag of the fact that that they remind you of your caretakers and the parts of your caretakers that could not fulfill your needs. So when we see somebody and we think, like I use the example sometimes of like, you think this guy is great, he's texting you 20 times a day and he's so, attentive. But meanwhile, and let me back up and say your dad never gave you attention. And you're like, so that you really need that, right? So you're together for a while and then you start to realize, wait a minute, like maybe, 10 or 7 years in or whatever it is, he's not really giving me what I need. 7 months, 7 months, right? Sometimes it happens really quick. He actually is at work, 14 hours a day, even though he's texting you. He's actually really not giving you the attention that you think because you want to see it.
Yeah.
We see what we want to see in people because we're so desperate to get those needs met. So Imago helps you to identify it. So it was this workbook we did, and we would meet together. So COVID was very serious for us because my husband's respiratory illness. We were home. Our kids were e-learners. We were like in the house for like a year. Just us, which actually turned out to be really, really good for our family. And luckily we had already healed about a year and a half. We were in therapy for a year and a half, so we could like stand being together. Like it wasn't so, because there were times before that in that year and a half, like the question you asked, very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Just like, it was just a terrible time. And then being in counseling together during that year and a half was really uncomfortable too. It was just like there were moments where, but then we'd have these moments of connection and coming together, and just the things that she did and the work that she did with us was fantastic. But so Imago kind of got us really kind of sealed the deal because we identified the parts of our caretakers, our parents, that we felt just because of who they are, they weren't able to give us, get our needs filled. You also pick somebody who has the qualities of your caretaker that served you, but you also choose that they didn't serve you. And then, so for an example, it's almost just easier to give an example. So my issue with emotional intimacy. My husband will say, I need that from you. And I'll say, well, I don't know how to do that, right? It wasn't given to me. I didn't experience that. And he'll say, well, are you willing to learn? And I say, yes, I'm willing to learn for the sake of the relationship. The beauty of Imago is that I'm not doing it just for him or for the relationship. By learning to be emotionally intimate, I'm healing the part of me that fears emotional intimacy. So your partner is just, you're attracted to people. That's why if you're in a difficult relationship, it's worth getting through this really uncomfortable period because we're drawn into partnership to heal our wounds, our childhood wounds. That's why you're attracted. It's subconscious. It's this crazy spiritual thing really that goes on, that we don't realize it, but we are attracted to people to point out to us what needs to heal inside of us. So when we were doing that, that too would get like really like hairy. Like I would just be like, this is really uncomfortable. Like the exercises, like they wanted us to do, like they wanted me to like sit on his lap. Like it was like this really weird, and I'm just very uncomfortable with things like that. I mean, now I'm more, but at that point I'm more comfortable now. At that point I was really uncomfortable with that. I'm like, this is really, really weird. But it was to bridge safety. We were trying to create a safe space with each other. And I had to, like, situations that we would go through that I could naturally feel myself kind of like recoil or like get like stiff. I could I'm retraining my brain, and I still do it sometimes. You know, I'm not 100% healed. Like you said, I think, well, I'm going to be healing this stuff probably forever. I'm definitely much further along on my spectrum, but I have to reframe and I have to retrain my brain to say, I'm safe. This is okay. I'm safe. And that's what it all comes down to, is feeling safe within your own bones, within your own self. Like, I'm okay, no matter what's going on around me, right? No matter who stays, no matter who leaves, no matter what's going on, I am good. And the healing of my marriage is what delivered me. That was my personal path. There are many paths. My path happened to be not leaving, staying, and really looking, taking the rose-colored glasses off that the next person is going to make me happy, and realizing, no, this is something within me. And if I use my relationship to help me get to that stuff that's in there, that's where the real healing. So we're healing our childhood, basically, is what we're doing.